Danielle Obono, who is from the Front de Gauche, the correct pronunciation, the left front in France. She's a political activist on the French left.
Okay, so first, to begin to give elements to that question, I like to question the question, because when we say democracy as a whole, most people think about electoral politics, getting people elected every once in a while, every 5 years, every 2 years, and then let them govern, and that is supposed to be democracy. And if we think democracy is that system, of course, there's an easy answer to the question, because when you check on the rates of participation in election in most countries in Western Europe, they are, for instance, in France, in the past election, it was between 30 to 60, up to 60% of abstention in election. So just people doesn't care about electoral politics, and more people are just alienated from politics as it is, institutions and all. So the obvious question is they don't even care going to say what they want for democratic government and stuff, and that could be left to that. But that can't actually, because to me, and I think what we have also to discuss is what is democracy to us. It's just not institution, electoral governments. It is also about daily and concrete things in life, in daily life. It's about, to me, power and control of individual power and control over our lives, over our society. And what it does means, I want just to give a concrete example about what is democracy and what is worth fighting for in such democracy. We're going to talk about it a little bit at the end about the basic socio-economic rights, which were democratic gains by the labor movement, by the social movement, and which have been under attack over the past, decades due to neoliberal policies. And it's about social services, it's about healthcare, it's about mass education, and so on and so on. And there needs to be a fight, because those were the means by which people, working class people, gain more power over their lives collectively, more power to go to school, more power to get free healthcare and stuff like that. And if we see democracy such as those different socio-economic rights, they need to be defended, because, and even more since the big crisis in 2008 and all, there were increased attacks on those socio-economic rights all over Europe. And we don't even need to see and to talk about what is happening in Greece now, which is a complete, the country is going back to the 19th century when we think about all the cuts and the austerity measures that are happening. We have been living in such a state of attacks in a lot of countries around Europe, in France, in England, and so on. But the danger are even higher now because of the crisis, and the attacks are going to be even more harsh. So that are the democratic rights we need to defend, and also because it leads to more political rights. When you see, for instance, what is happening in countries in Europe like Hungary, where there are far-right governments who are just cutting not only social rights but also democratic rights. It also shows what has been said about Greece, when there are technocrats who are just put at the top of the society, and it affects our daily lives, about the right to do whatever we want in society, or under attack also. But I think it's also what democracy is. It's just not just to defend the socio-economic rights. It's also to expand what I call civil rights. For instance, we have this debate now in France about, because it's a political year, there's presidential elections, and there's a lot of debates happening about civil and political rights. For instance, about lesbian and gay rights, the rights to get married, and the rights to have children. It's like, okay, are we talking about a democracy where there are people who aren't allowed to get married and get divorced if they want to, and have children just because of their sexuality. And this is undemocratic. And those rights still need to be fought for and won for a large part of the population. And it's just like these fights are to be won if we want to talk about a democracy, a day-to-day democracy for anyone living in our countries. There's also a discussion about immigrants' rights, the right for foreign immigrants to get elected and to vote in local elections in France. I mean, it should be easy to imagine that when you live somewhere for a couple of years, you should be able to say what you want about the council and the politics. But immigrants people, I mean, in France, foreign immigrants people are deprived of this basic right, which is to decide and to get somebody elected and to be elected. So those are the kind of fights we need to have. Just because it's not just about lesbian and gay rights or immigrants' rights, because it also affects everyone in the society. When you give the right to marry and the right to adopt children to lesbian and gay, you also change the idea of family. You also change the idea of couple and marriage for the whole of the society. When you say immigrants people can have the right to vote, you change also the idea of what is nation state, what is nationality. So those are the kind of fights we need to have if we want to even just ideologically to change the state of mind and say there still need to be progress. The democracy as it is isn't enough. We don't just have to have defensive fight, we also have to have offensive fights in order to expand the areas of democracy in society. And for that to happen, the key element to me is the involvement of the largest part of the population in social movements, in mass movements, to get those rights, to resist the attack. We need social movement. What we've seen in the past years in France have been mass movement to defend healthcare, to defend pension, against pension reform, and also the social movement and the lesbian and gay community and the pro-immigrants movement have been really essential in building the fight for more democratic rights, and that's essential, not just to win those battles, but also because in the process of building those movements, people begin to change and people begin to question not only the first demands they had, but also the society as a whole. This is is essential is that people stop being passive, people stop feeling useless and powerless, and because of mass movements, that's when they became actors and they feel like we can change things. If there are more people onto the street, if there are more people on strike, we can change things, and then anything can actually happen. And also they experience also the limits of democracy. For instance, in France, when we had millions of people in 2010 onto the street against pension reforms, and I mean the majority of the population, all the opinion polls said that the majority of the population is against this pension reform, and regardless of that, the government passed the reform, the Sarkozy government passed the reform, and then just people realized that the system is just crazy and it doesn't work when you got the majority of the people fighting for someone and the government, the one they elected, I mean, a majority of the people elected this government do the exact opposite of what the people want and what the people say, and just like it creates, I think, an important awareness and consciousness of the limits of the electoral system, of the naming of the actual so-called democracy, and people begin to question it and say, so we should get rid of those people and also change the system because it can't go this way. We also had another important movement in France during the past year was the 2005 campaign against the European Constitution. And there was a mass movement. What was interesting is at the beginning, all the opinion polls say people will vote yes to the constitution, the European constitution, which was pro-neoliberal and terrible. And there was a local rank and file campaign by left group, by trade unions, and people began to read this horrible constitution with lots of technocratic terms, and the people said we can, yeah, we get interested in that, and we finally won the no, the left no won the vote, and it was a great educational process, and people were talking to the street about Brussels, and the people have never been more interested in Europe actually than during that movement. And while at the same time the European election got the worst participation rate. So in this movement people get really interested. But at the end of the day the government decided to just go for it, and they just forget about what the people had said in this campaign, and they just went along with the Euro constitution and stuff. And it was also a very important moment, and saying that those people don't represent us, because when people are on strike, when they're on to the street, when there's a majority in the population who doesn't want pension reform, who doesn't want a European constitution, a neoliberal European constitution, they just don't give a shit, and they just go along with their politics, which are fundamentally anti-people. So I think the idea that we not only need to resist, but we also go on the offensive, and in that process, new areas of also discussion, but of ideas are open for people to get into action and begin questioning the system. And it doesn't even mean to at first be revolutionary ideas. Most of the time, it's just basic bread and butter issue people get involved in. And for instance, I'm just going to finish on this example. There's a big fight, a big working class fight in France nowadays about workers who got their factory closed down. And at first it was a very defensive fight, just not to get fired and stuff like that. But in the process, they began to think about how the factory was run and how actually they were the one running the factory. And they began to think about, okay, well, the boss wants to sell the factory, but what if we bought it back and we owned it, and we can make it run by ourselves? And they've been on strike not only to prevent the firing, but also to get ownership of the factory and just begin to organize by themselves. And it's been going on for several months now, and it's a very important issue in the movement, and they are still in the movement. So I think, just to conclude, those are the small examples of democratic rights that we need to defend, democratic movement that we need to build. And I think nowadays we got the crisis, as Andrew said, and politicians being just useless to do anything. They keep going with the attacks against the people. And I think that this is a moment where the democratic fight we need to have is able to become a true democratic one, which means a revolutionary one, when those on the top, as I think it's Lenin who used to say that those on the top can't rule the way they used to, which is actually what is happening with the crisis, and they don't have any B plan to change the system. And those on the bottom just won't be ruled just like the way it was, and feel like there is overweight. They should be overweight, than just like in Greece, austerity after austerity, and just survive. We need to do more survive. And so in those times, this is a moment where true democratic change can happen, which means revolutionary changes.